Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. We are back to do some official Banzuke guessing, this time with a little more separation than usual from the instant Banzuke cranked out immediately at the end of the basho. But first, the Sumo Kitten lineup has officially expanded. Say hello to new Ozeki and two-time Yusho winner Onya Sato, looking super cozy surrounded by trophies and draped sleepily across his championship cups next to an action shot of his famous Mega Yeet of the mighty Battle Hamster. Speaking of hamster, we've also added this retirement edition mug with our beloved Battle Hamster Takawaisho taking a well-earned rest, dreaming of his final victory over Yokozuna Terano Floofy. Check out our shop at sumospiffy.com for these new additions to the collection, and if you've yet to make a purchase, make sure you check out our other mugs and red stamp shirts. Alright, let's fix us up a Banzuke. First thing to point out is that at the top of Chiyotatsuke's Guess the Banzuke helper, it says there's a new feature for exporting your draft from this helper directly into the entry form rather than having to click on like 50 drop-down menus. I did get it to work once, but at the moment this function doesn't seem to work correctly. If it does get sorted out, I may put out another short video on how to use it, but more likely I'll just leave instructions in the next Guess the Banzuke video. Now for the Banzuke itself. As you can see, we've started sorting things out already. We've got Terano Fuji at Yokozuna 1 East as usual, Kotozakura 8 and 7 Ozeki 1 East, Hoshoryu 8 and 7 Ozeki 1 West. They stay in the same order they were last time because they finished with the same record, and Ono Sato coming up from Sekiwake is going to be the last Ozeki. As always, I will point out that they balance the Banzuke, the Sanyaku, so we've got one guy, two guys, one guy, and since there's only a third guy at the Ozeki rank, he's going to go on the west side, so they have 2 and 2. Kirishima was the only Sekiwake to stick around at the rank, so he's going to go to Sekiwake 1 East, and Daisho with his 8 and 7 record at Komusubi 1 East is going to fill the empty Sekiwake slot. No, Wakamoto Haru is not going to get it. There's no reason to give it to him. If they did give it to Wakamoto Haru, Daisho would not get a promotion, and it's very unlikely they're going to do that to him when he had a winning record at Komusubi 1 East and there is a spot for him to go to. And now we get to talk about the actual decisions we need to make, starting with who goes to Komusubi. Just like with the Instant Banzuke, if you saw that, I've got them lined up in relative order. Wakamoto Haru, mathematically, given his rank and his record, was a couple ranks ahead of like Shodai and Oho. He's definitely going to go to Komusubi 1 East. He's really the only option. Wakataka Kage finished 1 rank mathematically ahead of Shodai and 1.5 ahead of Oho. But because he was Maegashira 7 and the other guys were in the Joy, Wakataka Kage had an easier schedule, therefore it is almost certain that they're not going to put him at Komusubi. They are going to prefer the guys who had the harder schedules, who are in the Joy, those top 16 wrestlers, and they're going to bump Waka back. So for the moment, we're just going to pull him out. But that leaves 3 guys at Komusubi, and there's really no reason why they need to have 3. They only have to have 2. So Shodai or Oho is going to get that last spot. When the Instant Banzuke, I said Shodai. The more I think about it, the more I think that is not correct. Simply put, Oho is only a half rank behind Shodai mathematically, but he definitely had the harder schedule, or will have been perceived to have the harder schedule at Maegashira 2 West. He had to not only face the whole Sanyaku that was available, but also he had to fight Nishikigi as a test match, which has been largely left to the Sanyaku lately. More than that, Shodai is still getting a reasonable promotion if they leave him out of Komusubi, whereas Oho, yes, he would also get a reasonable promotion. He'd almost certainly end up at Maegashira 1 East, which is 1.5 ranks up on 9 and 6. That's okay. But in this case, I have been swayed to think that Oho's rank is going to prioritize him over Shodai's slightly better rank and record combination. So I'm putting Oho at Komusubi 1 West. Now what do we do with Shodai? Do we just bump him down and then slide everybody back in order? We could do that. In the Instant Banzuke, I had him at Maegashira 1 East. I had Hirata Umi staying at Maegashira 1 West, going down, not staying at Maegashira 1 West, but going down exactly 1 rank, so the appropriate demotion on 7 and 8, and Wakataka Kage going to Maegashira 2 East. I have seriously considered the possibility they are not going to do this. Shodai and Wakataka Kage could very easily end up at Maegashira 1 in some order, and then Hirudeumi to Maegashira 2 East. It's an over-demotion, but if they feel that Waka has done enough, that he proved enough to earn that spot and push Hirudeumi further back, I think they'll do that. I'm going to leave it, however, with Hirudeumi at 1 West and Wakataka Kage at 2 East. I am not convinced of this at all. This is more like there are 3 options. Waka at Maegashira 1 East, Waka at Maegashira 1 West, and then Waka at Maegashira 2 East. And then Shodai and Hirudeumi will be in that order, just working around wherever Waka goes. It's more like I think this one has a 40% chance of happening, and the other 2 where Waka is at Maegashira 1 are like 35 and 25. I'm not sold on this. If you think Waka is going to be at M1 and Hirudeumi is going to get bumped back, I think that's pretty fair. The one thing that I don't think is going to happen is Shodai ending up at Maegashira 2 and then Waka and Hirudeumi at Maegashira 1. Because then Shodai is only going up 2 ranks on 10 and 5, and he's getting pushed back in favor of a guy who is Maegashira 7. Given that Shodai had a Joy schedule, a Senyaku schedule, and Waka didn't, I don't think there's any way they're going to push Shodai that far back. In theory, they could make Shodai go to 1 West, leave Waka at 1 East because he did so good, he was 12 and 3, and then push Hirudeumi back that way. But it's one of those things where the 2 options that I'm not picking, I wouldn't be shocked if they happen, but I'm going to go with the one that I think is slightly more likely. That's Shodai, then Hirudeumi, then Waka. That bumps Ura over to Maegashira 2 West, and then do they bump Atami Fuji further back? Well, similarly speaking, I don't think they're going to put him behind Churanaumi like this, because Churanaumi was Maegashira 7, Atami Fuji was in the Joy, Chura is just barely ahead of him mathematically. There's really no reason for them to do that. But what I think is going to happen now that I didn't think previously is I now think Chura is going to get bumped behind Abi. Basically, Abi, if he goes to 4 East, that's his full demotion on 5 and 10. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think because he's Sekiwake, because he had essentially the hardest type of schedule, or he was the highest ranked guy short of Ozeki, they're going to give him just that little bit of favoritism, especially against a guy who wasn't in the Joy, had that definitely easier schedule. And even though it's kind of doing Chura dirty, it's not like it's the first time they'll have done something like this. Again, this is a 55-45. I've gotten swayed to the idea that Abi is, 55% chance he's going to be 3 West, 45% chance he's going to be at 4 East. So if you think this is wrong, that's pretty reasonable. But I've got this now. I switched it up. After that, things get a little easier for a while. Kota Shoho definitely ends up at 5 East behind Oshoma at 4 West. There really aren't any other options there. Tobizaru and Nishikigi were tied, but given that Nishikigi was way down the Banzuke and Tobizaru was 1 West, I think this tiebreaker definitely goes to Tobi. Then Endo is the easy fill-in at Maegashira 6 West. Takano Sho gets bumped up. He's got nobody around him to challenge for 7 East. But then we've got these 3 guys waiting in the wings: Konoyama, Midori Fuji, and Roga. In this case, Midori Fuji can only go to 8 West, and if you saw the Instant Banzuke, this is going to work out the same. I think Roga is going to get pushed ahead of Gonoyama. Gonoyama at 7 West would only drop 1 rank on 6 and 9, and he's been so disappointing, I just don't think that's going to happen. And yes, I do think a little bit of feeling is going to come into this. Gonoyama has not lived up to his potential, and when guys do that for long enough, the Banzuke committee can be a little deflationary in where they end up in the rankings. It's not significant, but it does happen a little bit. You look at these things long enough, you start to notice points where this sort of happens. And I think Gonoyama is just not going to be favored here. Give Roga the extra bump, see how he does, let Gonoyama drop a little bit further and prove himself again. Now we get to another change from the Instant Banzuke. Ichi Yamamoto, I think, is going to stay at 10 West, but I think that Takayasu is going to end up behind Mitakayumi. Before, I bumped Takayasu ahead, and I believe I said it was a pretty 50-50 choice, but now I'm pretty sure Mitakayumi is going to stay ahead. I feel somewhat confident in this. Maybe 65-35, 70-30. What it comes down to is, similar to the question of Nishikigi and Tobizaru, you've got a guy who had a Joy schedule from the start, who was getting hit by Senyaku guys from the start, versus a guy way down in the double digits. I think if there's an actual question here, it's, does Takayasu get treated the way Wakataka Kage did last time, where he actually gets pushed further back and only gets the exact promotion he's supposed to get of 5 ranks, and then they bump Ichi Yamamoto ahead to 9 West. That seems less likely. It's still not clear why they did that to Waka Takakage. My best guess with that is that they wanted to give him a schedule that even with injuries, they wouldn't see him face the Senyaku unless he really, really earned it. As much as I hate to say it, it does seem like occasionally certain guys get certain treatment and it's different from everybody else. And even if you can't tell why it's happening, you can figure out why it's that particular guy. Ono Sato, not that long ago, got treated very similarly, only he got spiked ahead. Waka got dropped back because Takayasu, obviously he's very popular, he's very, very good, but because he's not a guy who's going to threaten to stay in the Sanyaku for long because he's injured all the time, I don't think he's going to get any kind of different treatment. So the most logical thing that's going to happen is Takayumi will get bumped a little bit ahead because he had the tougher schedule. Takayasu goes to 9 West, Ichi Yamamoto to 10 East. Takarafuji is able to stay in place at 10 West. Tamawashi and Meisei. I still think Meisei is going to get the short end of this one. He's going to get over demoted. 7 and 8 is fine. You know, he gets his -1, but they've been unkind to guys with poor records of late. So Meisei, he's going to drop back a little bit. Well, now we got another tie. And in this case, I thought Sada no Umi, my initial guess was that Sada no Umi, because Ichi Yamamoto and Tamawashi both get exactly -1 on 7 and 8, they'll do the same thing to Sada no Umi. I am no longer convinced by this logic. I think that because Hokuto Fuji is there and Hokuto Fuji got the winning record, they're just going to put him ahead. This is a vibe pick. This is a 50-50. I just have a feeling on this. There's nothing that says that that's definitely going to do it. I don't have a particular logic for it that I think is really, really strong. I just think Sada no Umi gets bumped back. Shonen no Umi and Ryuden thusly get bumped back as well. Again, Chiyoshima is coming up from Juryo, so we don't really worry about him just yet. Oh wait, now we worry about him because there's no one else to fill 14 East. Onokatsu can only stay at 14 West because of his 7 and 8 record, and everybody else is either Nishiki Fuji or coming up from Juryo. So Chiyoshima, the best Juryo guy, he should go to 14 East, no sweat. Now we've got Toki Hayate, Shishi, and Nishiki Fuji. Given how they've tended to treat the Maegashira versus Juryo question, Nishiki Fuji seems the most likely person to go to 15 East since he did have a winning record and he's not being surpassed in any substantial way by Toki or Shishi. I think he's definitely ahead of Shishi. If you think this is wrong, this is really the only logical alternative unless they do something different with Takeru Fuji, but we'll get to him in a second. But if Toki Hayate is mathematically only a half rank ahead of Nishiki Fuji, I just think this is more likely. And now we get to the big man, Takeru Fuji. If you go by history, someone who goes crazy at Juryo 11 and is at the end of the line of the Juryo guys coming up should probably end up in the last slot. Now in the instant Banzuke, I put him here. And I thought about it some more. Should he actually go here instead? Well, in the instant Banzuke, what I had was Takeru Fuji, Bushozan, and Asakoryu. Now, Asakoryu is there, hopefully for obvious reasons. He was the next best Juryo guy. He was a couple ranks ahead of, I'll scroll down. He was a couple ranks ahead of Kinbozan and Kitanawaka, so that seemed like a reasonable guess. But I no longer think that's correct. I think Asakoryu stays in Juryo, and Kinbozan sticks around. Kinbozan over Kitanawaka because Kitanawaka getting saved with only a 1 rank drop on 6 and 9 when Kinbozan can go down 5 ranks on 4 and 11, which is much more reasonable, and stay in the division. I think Kinbozan, between those two guys, Kinbozan seems the much more likely choice. And I couldn't find a good reason. I did more research. I could not find a good reason to think that Asakoryu would be favored in this situation. So I am shifting to Kinbozan as getting the last slot, not Asakoryu. Now, that does sort of change the Takeru Fuji question somewhat. If we're keeping 2 guys from Maegashira, then do we keep Takeru Fuji at the bottom the way guys from the end of Juryo should be? If it was anyone else, if it was almost anybody else, I would say this is probably what they do. However, once in a while, you see a situation where the Banzuke committee or some aspect of the JSA makes a decision based on perception. They do something where it's like, you know, even if you don't realize it until after the fact, it's like, oh yeah, they're definitely making that decision because to do otherwise would look really bad / really dumb / really stupid. And I think if you put Takeru Fuji, given what he's done so far, behind Bushozan and Kinbozan, essentially saying he is slightly less good than those two guys, that's insane. For that reason, primarily, as much as I like to stick with numbers for my logic, I think the perception aspect of this is going to be the main reason Takeru Fuji ends up ahead of Bushozan and Kinbozan. Takeru Fuji 216 West, Bushozan 217 East, and Kinbozan finishes it off, lucking into another Makuuchi salary at 17 West. And that is the Banzuke. As a reminder, here are the big question marks, and there are many. 1. Oho or Shodai, who gets the Komusubi spot? Wakataka Kage, does he go to M2 East, M1 West, or even M1 East? Probably not Komusubi though. Abi and Chur no Umi, who's gonna get favored there? Mitakeumi and Takayasu. Ichi Yamamoto technically is part of this too, because he was tied with both of those guys. I feel pretty confident he's gonna end up at 10 East, but he is part of that. You might feel he's gonna end up in a different spot, I don't know. Tamawashi and Meisei, I think it's probably Meisei, but this is a question mark. Hokuto Fuji and Sadano Umi is a humongous question mark. Nishiki Fuji is a small question mark. He could get swapped with Toki Hayate. And then Takeru Fuji, even though I think he's going to end up at 16 West, it's definitely not a given. I'd be surprised if he's 17 East. He'd probably 16 West or 17 West, which probably means he's going to end up at 17 East. So what does your Banzuke look like? Let me know in the comments. Other than that, remember to check out sumospiffy.com for that new sumo kitten sweetness. Get ready for the upcoming Banzuke. Have a great day, and I will see you soon.